Hey,
Yo,
how's it going? Can you hear me?
yeah, what's going on, man?
Awesome. Not much, not much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, all right. Um, so yeah, we kind of talked about it in messages, but it's live recording right now. I don't edit anything; it goes up right after this.
Awesome.
I mean, as much as Anchor lets me. I mean, they have to review it before they let it go live and shit. But and then I do a little editing for YouTube. I usually throw a lightning fountain in the episode and then put it up on YouTube. So,
Awesome.
um,
Sounds great.
all right. So as we discussed, there's obviously going to be some questions that people want me to ask, but we've talked a little bit. You seem like a pretty down to earth guy and not the kind to take anything too personal. So let's let it rip.
Yeah, sounds
Um,
great.
so tell me about what you guys are doing at Foundation.
Yeah, so we started Foundation Devices to build really nicely designed, fully open source hardware for Bitcoin and a Bitcoin powered decentralized internet. So, just like personally, I've been in Bitcoin since 2013 and I've used all the different hardware wallets and different devices and just wanted to build something that I thought was more accessible to a wider range of people. So we're starting with Passport, which we've been shipping for a couple months now, our hardware wallet. But over time, we want to try to build an entire, like a entire new ecosystem of what we call like sovereign computing hardware, meaning devices that actually value your privacy, that are totally open source, and that try to empower individuals with sovereignty. I myself am, or maybe I should say, was like a huge Apple fan for many years, and I've kind of been going down this journey of finding sovereignty that was really sparked by Bitcoin and listening to podcasts like TFTC, Stefan Levera, and others over the years has made me much more of a libertarian, I would say. And so our goal is to try to figure out how do we build hardware and product experiences that mass consumers want to buy and use that actually end up giving them sovereignty. So yes, that's a little bit about what we're doing, and we started the company last April, and yeah, it's been pretty amazing so far.
So you guys, do you have a physical locate, like an office headquarters in Boston? Because I saw you guys at Boston.
Yeah, we got I'm actually we just set up a little studio office. So I'm in that right now. But the team is distributed. We started with 4 founders throughout the United States, and somehow in the last like 6 weeks we're now 10 people, which has been kind of crazy. So it's been a lot of fun over the last few weeks. We've been starting to build out products, that are coming up over the next several months and over the next year. But yeah, I'm I live in Boston. I've been in Boston since uh, going to school here in 2010. So I've been here for about a decade now, and it's kind of cool because Boston is the heart of the American Revolution. If you look back historically, so it's kind of cool to walk past some of the the sites every day, like where the Boston Massacre took place and the Tea Party and so on.
A lot of people think we're assholes. I'm a New Englander too, by the way.
Oh,
If you
are
couldn't
you?
tell by the horrid accent. Um, yeah. So it was cool for me to notice. I found out about you guys through Coin Icarus,
Hmm.
and I was actually bugging Coin Icarus for a while. I'm like, yo, I need to get a, I need to get a new hardware wallet. I need to get a new hardware wallet. I need to get a new hardware wallet. And I'm like a cheap Portuguese guy from New England, so I like shop around, and he was like, he hit me up and he's like, hey, Foundation is giving passports to people who have a podcast and will review them for them. And I was like, oh, no shit. He's like, yeah, send him a message. So I sent you guys a message, and, disclaimer for everybody listening. Yes, you guys sent me a passport. Yes, I love that passport. I've fought vehemently with many people in comment sections, in person, in DMs, that, I will fucking die on the passport hill.
I appreciate that. I actually didn't even see those comments, by the way. I'm probably blocked by all those people.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, what separates you from a cold card? Because you guys are a fork of cold card, which is, I've had this conversation. I mean, this is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. So my understanding is you guys forked cold card's code, cold card forked Trezor's code. So basically, everything leads back to Trezor. But that's what free open source software is about. But what if a person was to sit down side by side with a passport and a cold card, what separates you two?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a bunch of different things. So firstly, I was on a TFTC, with Marty Bent about a year ago when I was announcing what we were working on. And I was the one that said we were a fork of Cold Card, well before we even publicly posted any information about what we were building. So it's something that we've always been extremely upfront about, not trying to hide it at all. I have a lot of respect for those guys as well. That's the hardware wallet that I used and still use personally, in multi-sig setups, and been buying open dimes for years. But we could talk more about that as well. But major differences. So firstly, the hardware is pretty much completely different. To my understanding, we actually only share like a single hardware component on the circuit board, which is the secure element chip, which is made by Microchip. So we, and then also Bitbox 02, use that same chip. Besides that, the entire hardware design is totally novel. So we have a different screen, a screen that we like to think is actually more trustable, tamper evident, made by Sharp, 1.8 inch. We have a very responsive keypad. We have a faster processor of the same family, but it's clocked at 480 megahertz, which is like 4 times faster. We have a camera, and all that circuitry, is our own. And the camera is used for scanning QR codes because Passport is actually a air gap device that does transactions over QR codes. We, have some other cool features. Like we have this open source schematic that we implemented to generate random numbers without relying on any kind of black box silicon. It's called an avalanche noise source. So we have that. And then the entire enclosure, it has integrated, AAA batteries to power, and everything is just very different. I would argue, higher quality than what you find on most of the other hardware wallets today. So there's, enormous hardware differences. Then what we did as well with that is we totally open sourced the hardware, which is super rare. I think the only companies that open source the actual circuit boards in the space, I think Trezor is the only one that does it properly, and I think Bitbox 02 does it okay, but we're really proud of doing that because it's like very unusual to actually open up all the physical hardware designs, both the mechanical and electrical stuff. In terms of firmware, we started off by forking it, and then pretty quickly we decided instead to port over select files instead. So we started up a new MicroPython project at a later version, which is like the same project that's used by Trezor and Coldcard. And we brought in a bunch of stuff from them. The main stuff that we brought in was like the all the code that had to do with like the security of the device. So like interacting with a secure element, doing pin entry, storing a seed securely, that kind of thing. And then we also brought in all of like the, Bitcoin signing related code, right? Like creating, signing PSBTs and so on.
Right.
And those were the primary things we brought in. The user interface is completely different. We have a lot of other and different features as well. I would argue that like for Coldcard, for us, for Trezor, it's like 90% of the code is actually MicroPython, which is the low-level operating system that's running on the device. And then you just have a bunch of files on top of that. But we made some big changes in security model as well. Like we actually have a different bootloader completely than what Coldcard did. Which means that when you turn on the device, like Coldcard, there's certain things you cannot update in a firmware update. What we instead did is we have an extremely lightweight bootloader. Then we let you update pretty much everything in firmware. So there's some vulnerabilities like in the Mark II, for example, that they were unable to fix just because of that architecture. It's just different trade-offs. I could talk more about it, but it's just different trade-offs. And we just had a different opinion on how we want to implement that. So that's an example of how it's different. So definitely shares a lot of code. The other big difference, though, which is kind of crazy, and I did not expect this to happen because I know they were pretty big open source advocates over in the cold card, camp, was that they actually changed the license on the project, and it's no longer officially, open source hardware or open source software. And of course, our firmware and everything is totally, free and open source software. So that's another big difference. If you're buying a Passport, we're using, open source software licenses. In this case, GPL is the governing license. And so you are more than welcome to fork our code and use it for any purpose, whether that is, personal or business. And the only thing you have to do is you have to open source your code in return. So that would be like a copyleft or viral, open source license. And I'm also happy to talk more about like why I think that's important. I think there's been a lot of drama in regards to that in the last month or so in the Bitcoin community, especially around the node projects. It hasn't come up as much in the hardware wallet projects yet, but I'm sure it will.
I mean, there's a lot of, you definitely see it with the node projects, right? But I should say you see it in podcasts, you see it in, like, it's openly being talked about with the node projects.
Right.
But I see a lot on the back end and in personal conversations with people about hardware wallets and what kind of licenses people are using. And I'll openly say, anybody who's ever, listened to this podcast or follows me on Twitter is well aware of the kind of person that I am, and I call it as I see it. And I don't fucking like NVK, and I've had that conversation with many people. I just don't. I don't like. I think he's arrogant, and I'm not a fan of people like that. And to me, you don't throw stones in a glass house, and that's from a completely non-technical pleb point of view. That was what I saw when it came to you guys and Cold Card. It was him throwing stones at you guys for forking him after he had forked Trezor. And that shit, to me, I know you probably on a more professional level won't, don't like to say things like that, but I don't give a shit. I don't like him.
Well, this is a plebcast, right? I mean, yeah. I look, we that was the most surprising thing about starting the company, honestly, because we were all super jazzed up. We were excited to contribute to the ecosystem. We quit our jobs. We started this thing in the beginning of COVID back in April, which was total pain in the ass to try to raise capital. We started this thing when we had $70K committed from some angel investors, and we had no idea how we were going to have enough money to even design the device, do the prototyping, bring it to market, and manage to live for ourselves, right? So we're really excited. And yeah, I knew it would be hard, but I think the thing that was most shocking to me was that reaction when we announced that we were using a bunch of cold card code. I was not expecting that. It was a pretty enormous response from NVK and some of his followers. And at first, we tried to engage and explain. And then after a few weeks, we realized it was totally futile, got swarmed by, dozens of anonymous Twitter handles. And I'm sure a lot of them were actual, people, and I'm sure a lot of them weren't. And we just decided to kind of, from there on, take the high ground and just not engage anymore. And so sometimes I want to engage. And so I kind of am, I'm excited about this conversation that we're having, because I could be more just to the point about it.
I get in it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's just man, I feel like a common theme in Bitcoin over the years is you got to your idols will always betray you. This is happening time and time again. There's always some figure who's a big deal in Bitcoin, and then they say something or do something that you're holy shit, I can't believe they just said that or did that. Now I'm like, they just burned their entire reputation. I feel like that's happened all the way back, going back to the, forks originally,
I mean, it's
like,
heavy right now.
yeah, it's
You see it right now with all the influencers. The
yeah,
influencers
yeah,
grab onto each other, and everybody's defending each other, and everybody else on Twitter is like, "Fuck you guys. We don't give a shit what you think. We don't give
yeah,
a shit about how many views your podcast has or how many sponsors you have. We're gonna tell you what we think of you because that's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin exposes you to yourself, and it's all about truth. So
yeah.
if you're gonna be a phony and you're gonna come up in here and try to be something and try to tell us that, oh, I'm gonna do this or I'm gonna do that. Well, that's fucking great, but just expect everybody to tell you exactly how they feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I mean, NVK, like someone I really looked up to for many years. Like I mentioned, I was buying open dimes for years. I don't know if you remember that Open Bazaar marketplace, or if do you remember that?
No.
So this was back in like 2014, 15, 16. Those guys actually ended up like being on the wrong side of the fork stuff, and they they also kind of got canceled. So this happens all the time. But anyway, I had a shop on there. I had a HODL hardware shop, and in 2015, 2016, I was a certified hardware wallet reseller for Ledger and Trezor. And I was also buying and selling open dimes on this thing. And it was like a decentralized eBay almost. Like it was like a Bitcoin based eBay. You had to install the client software on your computer. Everyone was hyped up. You'd make a transaction and there'd be like a random moderator assigned to it, and you'd have to it was a little sketchy. I don't know what was going on there, but I managed to snag the Twitter handle, like at HODL, even the 4-letter handle, which is kind of crazy that I still have that. But anyway, I've been selling his devices to customers. I've been providing support for those devices since he was first shipping open dimes. I got a block clock. I use cold cards, personally, and that was the device that I always recommended to everyone. Obviously, always had to caveat it by saying it's like a little harder to use. You might have to be a little bit more technical to wrap your head around it. But like that was my thing, and one of the craziest things, especially over the years on Twitter, and he, MVK actually deleted a tweet. But he was arguing with Trezor when Cold Card started in 2018 because they didn't fork all Trezor. I want to make really clear they forked just some specific libraries, the crypto libraries, like the mod Trezor crypto, which is like the embedded optimized versions of these different crypto algorithms. And Pavel, the CTO at Trezor, was saying, why do you fork the library and change the name? Like, why are you making changes to the name? You basically deleted Trezor off the name. Like, please add us back. And NVK was like, dude, it's open source. Like, we can do whatever we want with it. Maybe you guys should go add a secure element to Trezor. And he actually welcomed them to use the cold card code. This was, back in 2018 on like a Twitter fighting. And I actually stepped into that back then, and I defended NVK. So you can find like tweets with me kind of going back and forth defending NVK from Pavel at Trezor. And then you'll see one's deleted now. But like, that's why it was so shocking to me, because I just kind of took it at face value and was thinking, we're going to come in, we're going to come out with a more premium product. It's more mass market consumers. It only has like a fraction of the actual features that a cold card has, because we're trying to make it simple and accessible to the widest number of people. And like, we'll make our own open source contributions, like everything we do is open source. Anyone can use our stuff for anything they want, hardware or software. And we're not really going to compete with them because we're kind of targeting like very different audiences ultimately. And then all that shit went down, and it was kind of shocking back last year.
And just to be clear too, so for the people who don't know, your wallet is or your hardware device is more expensive than a cold card.
Oh yeah.
But I do want to say that anybody, again, there's, I'm in several group chats, and everybody kind of dogs on me and they call me a boomer, even though I'm only 32. And it was a very easy experience. using that device for me. I'm not like a super technical guy, but it was a comfortable experience. Except for that one thing that I messaged you about with Blue Wallet, but that got fixed in the firmware.
Yep. Yeah, that was quick. You got it at a bad time. Blue Wallet had just pushed an update, and we were like a week away from pushing ours. So there was like a week where there were some issues.
And to be clear, it was made very clear to me by several people that when I'm moving funds to a hardware wallet, that I should move a little bit and then move some out. And I moved a little bit, and it showed up in the hard. And I put literally my whole stack into a passport and didn't move anything. And then all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, let me move some," and I fucking couldn't get it to move.
Don't worry. Yeah, that was. I'm sure that's scary. I'm glad we got that sorted out like instantly for you.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, right? So that happened to me at like 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
And like I instantly hit up Coin Icarus and I was like, "Yo, what the fuck is going on?" And he was like, "I don't know, send me a screenshot. What's your phone saying?" And like I said it to him. He's like, "I don't know, but listen, here's the Telegram group. Your keys are safe."
Yeah, yeah.
Like you have your backup written down, so you're good. Like the money is there. You just can't move it for some reason. Like they'll help you figure it out, but don't worry, your money's there.
Yep.
But it was, I mean, once I updated the firmware and the little things like anything you expect from a company that's getting started, right? The flash in the firmware with the micro SD not facing the right way, and you had to restart it afterwards.
Fix that.
Yes.
Yep.
I highly recommend anybody that has one to get into your guys' Telegram group, because it's been, I mean, every question I have, the answer is either already there or I can get it right away. So
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, we actually haven't even advertised the Telegram group at all. Like we
should.
Yeah, we shared it because we want to keep it small at first. We only launched it like a month ago, and we shared it in just like one or two of our customer emails. So I think we'll definitely push it on Twitter now that it's like there's a bunch of people in there, people are answering each other's questions. That's the most amazing thing to see, right? Where you have just people in there, pseudonymous. I have no idea who they are. Like Bitcoin Q&A is in there answering people's questions. And I'm like, holy shit, this is incredible.
Yeah. And he kills it. I mean, he's walked me through a couple of questions that I had, and it's really good to see an ecosystem like that where people are, helping each other to get, to hold your own keys.
Yeah.
Coin Icarus laughs at me, and like, I'll talk about it now because it's in the past, but like, I was talking to Coin Icarus probably 2 months ago or something, and I was like, yeah, I gotta grab a hardware wallet. He's like, what do you mean you gotta grab a hardware wallet? I'm like, yeah, dude, like I have my whole life in Bitcoin. Like my entire net worth is in Bitcoin, and it's spread out across like, I don't know, 7 hot wallets. He's like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, bro, I don't know. I was going to get around to it. You know what I mean? I figured like not all my eggs in one basket. If they hit one wallet, I'm good. I got some somewhere else. He's like, dude, what the fuck? Like we need to get you need to hold your keys.
Yeah, that's actually hilarious. But I feel like everyone goes kind of through the same journey, right? You start with the exchange, you do the hot wallet, and you kind of improve your setup over time, which I think is awesome that you can do that. I love that it's not like it's not like a decision, between one or the other. It's almost like a gradual process that pretty much every Bitcoiner goes through. If you get into Bitcoin and you stay into Bitcoin, you always end up with self-custody in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a buddy of mine who I do some business with. Me and him are in the process of actually trying to get investors we're building a mine. So it's like
awesome.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. But anyway, he called me up a couple weeks ago and he's like, hey, how do I get my Bitcoin off of Gemini?
So
I was like,
yeah.
What? I was like, hold on, wait. You've been in Bitcoin longer than I've been in Bitcoin, and you've been stacking longer than I've stacking. And I don't know how much you hold, but I know you've said you've told me certain price points and what you would be doing with your life at those times. You have way too much Bitcoin to be holding it on a fucking exchange.
Yeah, I mean, look, like this is actually why we started the company. Like, why? Because everyone likes to talk about how there's all these options for, and it's so obvious that the vast majority of users are not using those options. Their coins are on Coinbase, their coins are on Gemini, Many of them are using that like vault feature where they think it's like secure, but all it means is that Coinbase like makes you 2FA and then wait a period of time before letting you withdraw the coins, which I think is even worse because if you really need them, you got to wait. and so like most people just do the math, right? Most people are not storing their own keys. And so then you got to, and to me, like the most obvious and only answer is that it's a UX problem. And that's one of the other hilarious things in the Bitcoin community over the last few years is like fights around the UX, you know, like there's all, you know, Bitcoiners on Twitter saying like the UX is fine. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? The UX is not fine. If you have to, if you've been in Bitcoin for years and you have to ask how to get your coins off of Gemini, that means that something's wrong.
Absolutely.
And so that's the other reason why we really want to do the camera on the device was for the integration with mobile phones. I think Apple has like crippled the entire mobile state of Bitcoin self-custody because Apple stops you from like plugging things into an iPhone. You know, like there's wallets on Android that let you plug in a hardware wallet, but you're not allowed to do that on an iPhone. And so pretty much most of the developments in terms of like cold storage over the last 5 years, and you know, I think hardware wallets only began like 5 or 6 years ago. It's all desktop based. And the vast majority of people using the internet are just using their phones. I think most people, like most young people, they don't even have like a computer anymore. You use a computer for work, you know, and then you grab your iPad or your iPhone or something for everything else. And so if you don't have solutions that are like mobile first, then I don't think we're going to get a lot of people. So that's why like I got really excited back in 2019, I think, about QR codes. And yeah, I think they're awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me and so I'm like a small town blue collar guy, right?
Yeah.
So I know for me and the few people that I know like outside of Twitter that are like into Bitcoin, like the idea of doing anything on a computer that isn't school or work related is just alien. Like I'm 32, so
Exactly.
like I was on a computer a lot because phones, you know, I remember free call me after 9 because it's free. Like I remember those days, you know what I mean? So
yeah, dial up, you know.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go on the internet, so I'm gonna type in all my stuff, and I'll come back in 20 minutes
and
after
then
I eat
dinner. Your phone doesn't work, you know. So.
And then somebody picks the phone up after you get on, and you're off again. So
yeah.
like, I say that to say, once a phone became capable of doing everything I use the computer for, my computer experience stopped until I needed it for something work related or college related. So to have, you know, that was kind of what kept me away from hardware wallets, was like all the hardware wallets I looked at were like, oh yeah, like they either didn't have a screen, which I know some people like, but I don't.
Yeah.
That worries me. Or it was cold card, and I was like, yo, I want to buy a cold card so bad. Cold card looks so, everybody says cold card's the best, and then I'd look at it and I'd be like, it's intimidating. It looks like an old Game Boy, but with a calculator slapped on it. And I'm like, I don't know enough to trust the amount of money that I want to move to that. So like to have your device where I can see and I have to clear up that I was completely mistaken about what a hardware wallet was.
Right.
Like I thought it worked like a software wallet works.
I hate the name hardware wallet. We're going to stop calling ourselves that, I think.
I didn't understand. I thought I would like turn that thing on and it would show me how much Bitcoin I was holding.
You were right.
You know what I mean? Like that's how I saw it, because at that point I was using Blue Wallet, and I was using the vault, you know, the multi-sig vault on Blue Wallet.
Yep.
So I would go in there and it would tell me how much money I had.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, I'm just going to get a hardware wallet. It's going to be the same deal, but I could never connect the dots. I'm like, if I get a cold card, that little screen doesn't look like it's going to tell me how much money I have. So like I was completely uninformed about what it meant, what a hardware wallet meant.
Yeah, and it's like that's what we're going to have to work on, you know, over the next years and beyond is just trying to make this thing as easy as possible to use. There's already so many things that we're starting to improve, and we're working on, updates for our next batch of devices, which will come around October, November, and just easier onboarding, easier way of doing firmware updates. I think there's just a lot of cool stuff that we're going to have that, you should be able to give this to someone with like a basic setup guide who's like new to Bitcoin, and they should be able to get up and running with it. I don't know what you think about it, but I really want to just start calling them like key signing devices.
That would call the device what it is.
Yeah. That's what we want to call it, because it's just such a stupid name. It's incredibly confusing to
I think it's
Bitcoiner. Yeah.
I think it's a big problem too. I can tell you my experience, right? My experience is when I got a lot of my knowledge on Bitcoin from like podcasts and YouTube at first. Then I branched out into like books, and then I found Bitcoin Twitter. And I think there's this problem with like, then this is my observation, and if people don't like it, fucking don't listen. But I think there's this problem with everybody likes to walk around with like their chest out, like I know how to do everything, and I know what everything means. And there's not enough discussion about like, hey, this is what a hardware wallet means.
Right.
Like, this is what a partially signed Bitcoin transaction is. Everybody's like, oh, yeah. Partially signed Bitcoin transaction. Yeah. I know what that is.
Yeah.
But there's no like, and honestly, there needs to be more of that in the ecosystem. Like, yeah, we shitpost and we make memes, and that's great and that's fun, and that's 90% of what I do on Twitter. But like, I think that's it's important for me, especially like with this podcast, and like when I'm on Twitter, like I openly tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't even own a whole coin. Like, you need to know that, because if you're coming on to
think
Bitcoin
like
Twitter,
every OG or every like influencer on Twitter has to be like rich,
Yeah, I'm like, listen, I'm class of 2020. Like, I did some shit coining at the end of 2020. I got out of those shit coins. Since then, I've been Bitcoin only. That's my story. I don't claim to have a ton of fucking Bitcoin. I don't claim to know everything. I don't even own a whole coin. I didn't have a hardware wallet up until like I got the hardware wallet from you guys. But like, that shit's important. I know when I showed up on Bitcoin Twitter, like you just said, it felt like everybody had $10 million. Everybody had been here since 2009. Everybody, everybody's an OG. Everybody knows everything there is to know. And I'm like, all right, well, it almost makes you feel like, well, I can't ask a question.
Well, let's talk about the shitcoin thing, because you just brought that up. Right?
Let's talk about the shitcoin thing, right? Because I got to ask about Obelisk.
Yeah, of course, and I'm down to talk about it, obviously. And I'll bring it up myself, But I mean, let's be super clear. Most Bitcoiners go through the same journey, which is you learn about Bitcoin or you learn about some shitcoin, and then for some period of time you like shitcoins too, and then over time you get exposed to more and more content. You learn more, you progress. And you're like, holy shit, Bitcoin is the only thing that's important. And everyone goes through that. I mean, if you don't go through that, then then you're one, hell of a genius, right? Though I would argue the smartest people often, or there's that meme where it's like the IQ below, 80, IQ above 120 or whatever, and the people in the middle, I feel like it's all the people in the middle are always like, super smart people are getting pulled into all this scammy stuff, right? But I went through that same journey over the years. And so you just mentioned you went through that journey, and I'd say the vast majority of people go through that journey. But it feels, if you hop onto Bitcoin Twitter, like you're the only one. Like it feels like there's this purity test where if you ever thought about a shitcoin, then there's something wrong with you. And that's just bullshit. That's not how it is for pretty much anyone in the space.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, so my view on that, which I've been very open about, is you can do whatever you want. Just don't come on Bitcoin Twitter and have like Bitcoin maximalist in your profile and talking about how it's Bitcoin only, and then like I jump into spaces and you're talking about the crypto, like the crypto industry as a whole, and where's crypto going. And these are some interesting projects, because I'm going to call you out, and not in a pleasant way. And like,
and
there's enough people talking out of both sides of their mouth in the fiat world that I'm very adamant about, like, exposing those that I see do it in Bitcoin.
Right. But let's also say, like, just to be clear, I love throwing nuance into this, and asking like much harder questions. Like, is Liquid, a shitcoin? Is Urbit? A lot of Bitcoiners love Urbit. It's super. I don't know if you're familiar with that project. It's not a crypto project. It's like a decentralized internet type project. They actually have a Bitcoin wallet now integrated with it, but the usernames and so forth are actually running on the Ethereum blockchain. They didn't make that decision at all based on wanting to use Ethereum. They just needed some kind of decentralized way to do it, and that was all that existed at the time. It could probably be on Lightning or something now if they wanted to migrate it. But like, that's a good example where it's like, that doesn't even have a coin attached to it. There was no ICO. There's no scamminess. They're like, it's a really, really cool project. So is that a shitcoin? And so I just want to make it clear too, that like, there's a spectrum here, and it's a tough one to try to balance that and figure it out. And there's, you see people fighting all day on Bitcoin Twitter about things like Liquid, and other stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I may be a little biased because Adam Beck hangs out with the meme tards, and I'm with the meme tards. So I may be a little biased, but, like, to me, a shitcoin is defined as anything that is a token that is trending to zero across time against Bitcoin. Right. Now, that being said, I am not sure how you can define Liquid as a shitcoin because it's pegged to Bitcoin.
Right. But then there's other stuff. There's like Sovereign, which is supposed to be like Bitcoin DeFi, where they have a coin that's supposedly like.
Yeah, I don't think that shit needs coins.
Yeah. There's Blockstack, which has a coin now, which supposedly they have a proof of something work. It's not proof of work, but they like burn Bitcoin's proof of work. I think that would probably there's you see what I'm saying. It's like
none of it needs to be a coin. That was the most important thing that was said to me, was none of that shit needs to be money.
Right. And I define it as, if you're asking people to, I think the simplest way for me is like, are you telling people to go buy another coin? And that's not Bitcoin. That is like the simplest thing to me, where it's like, don't get Bitcoin, go get this coin. That to me is shitcoinery, right? So that's kind of how like I define it, where there's
a lot of, like you said, so one of the most shocking like statistics that somebody gave me, and it's probably not based on anything concrete, but was that in like the Bitcoin space and in like Bitcoin Twitter, there's probably like 5 to 6% that are actually like Bitcoin only. Like, there are a lot of people that talk it, but as far as actually being Bitcoin only, like, those are probably the numbers. There's a lot of like, and the longer you hang around, like the more you hear, like there's a lot of people who are like Monero dudes.
I was about to bring up Monero because most people don't have because I was going to segue this into what I was working on when I spent a few years, out after business school, working for a team in Boston that was building both Siacoin, which is one of those shit coins, and then Obelisk. And most people don't realize, but Sia had at one point was held to like the same esteem as Monero amongst the Bitcoin developers.
Super privacy focused.
All about decentralized data storage. Never did a token sale. Right. So no ICO, I should say. There was like a security type offering, but nothing to do with like the main coin. So no ICO. The team actually held 0 Siacoin. And it was like a very technically credible decentralized cloud storage project that had working, software, kind of competing with like AWS, basically, like their cloud storage or Dropbox. And David Dvorak, who's still the CEO, is very, very close friends with a lot of the Bitcoin core devs, and just an extremely like well-respected and technically credible, person in the space. And was not competing with Bitcoin at all, was very much like that pure utility coin, where it's like you're going to get this coin and you're going to use it to pay for storage on the decentralized network. And this was well before anything like Lightning existed. This was actually, they started before Ethereum, so this is like.
So different from Filecoin.
Oh yeah, no, the Filecoin is a total shitcoin. Filecoin is vaporware. Yeah. So, and most of that stuff is vaporware. And so like, that's why, I was super into Bitcoin in like 2013. I got into it. 2014, I graduated college and then was in business school in 2016. I ended up dropping out to join this team in Boston because it was 2 founders and 1 developer, and I was going to be like the second employee. And that was a really amazing experience because I was like, holy shit, I get to work for this this company in Boston. I literally met, David at a coffee shop in late 2016. And I get to help build out this decentralized cloud storage network that's going to, compete with, Amazon, right? And allow people to have total sovereignty and store their data for an order of magnitude less money. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty awesome. As I was super into Bitcoin, but I was definitely not like a Bitcoin maxi, right? I thought Monero was cool. I thought a bunch of stuff was cool. And
which I think was very common back then.
This was 2016.
Like, I don't think the maximalist thing. I think the maximalist thing is like from what I've been told, it's like a 2018, 19, like.
Well, also like, keep in mind, Bitcoin had no way of doing any kind of smart contract or any kind of like you couldn't really build on top of Bitcoin so much yet. A lot of the stuff now, I think, could be built on Bitcoin. And that's what's like really exciting. You look at all the stuff with Lightning, and you're like, holy shit, you don't actually need a separate chain for this. You can just build it on Bitcoin. And that didn't exist back then. And so there were a lot of people interested in back then, Bitcoin, Saya, Monero. People were interested in things like Zcash. I remember the first Ethereum I bought was Ethereum Classic at the week of the fork. Because I was like, screw Ethereum. I'm buying Ethereum Classic just as like, solidarity with, not changing the blockchain history.
For the reorg.
Yeah. So I was like, this is awesome. I'm going on Poloniex and I'm hanging out in the troll box and I'm buying Ethereum Classic. And so I think it was a little different. I don't think those same purity tests existed. And I was like so excited too, because I traditionally did mechanical engineering in school, and as soon as I joined the Saya team to be their head of operations, they were like, "Hey, like we kicked off this project. Like we're going to be building ASIC miner for Saya Coin." I was like, "Holy shit!" Because that's what I wanted to actually do back in. I think 2015, 2016. I don't know if you remember another one who fell out of favor, Vinny Langham, wrote a ton of like these hugely like shared blog posts about Bitcoin. And then, ended up being on the wrong side of the fork stuff and everyone stopped, listening to him. But I was like, he was an angel investor. I was like editing his blog posts while I was in school. I was talking to him. I was like, hey, can you give me like an angel investment? I'm going to go buy ASIC chips from Bitfury. I'm going to put them into like this really badass form factor and sell them to like the US market. And I can, buy chips from one of the ASIC companies. And I had this cool design with like stacked fans, like instead of the one fan on either side, it was like 2 fans, like 1 fan on top, 1 fan below. And I had like a little rendering I was sharing with some investors, and I was like, I'm going to go, start this company. And I ended up not doing that. Right. I ended up joining up with the Saya team and then being told that we were going to be able to do an ASIC. And I got to run most of the day-to-day operations for that whole project. And all I want to do is hardware, like that's what I studied in school. Never got to do it after school. I was doing like software product management. And so, yeah, like dove headfirst in, and helped build out that, that company Obelisk as well.
So run me through Obelisk. I've heard pieces, and the pieces that I've heard, some are from people that I'm relatively tight with, and most are from people who are just like hardcore NVK lovers. And
so, yeah,
he's a shit coiner, and look at all the shit coiners, and
yeah,
they're involved with who the hell what was the last one that I heard? The fuck's his name? The guy that Peter McCormick just had on. Everybody hates. The guy that said fuck toxic maximalism at Bitcoin.
Oh, is it
Voorhees?
Yeah. Oh man. So I'll tell you about all this because that's such bullshit.
Okay, so Voorhees, from what I've been told,
someone circulated. Listen to this. Someone circulated, like someone in the MVK circle wrote up this like hit piece on us. They obviously had no idea about the history of Obelisk or what we had done, and they just like Googled shit, and like found stuff. And they made it seem like Voorhees was like a key investor, in the company. I've never talked to the guy. He's an LP, a limited partner in one of the venture funds who wrote us a tiny check for the funding round. That's the connection.
Yeah.
So he is an investor in a venture capital fund that wrote us a check in our pre-seed round.
That was what I found when I looked.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Stop trying to make these, like, if you're going to go after us, go after the product. Don't try to go after our character based on like bullshit mischaracterizations, that you could do 10 minutes of research on and actually see what the connection is. But anyway, so I'm really proud of what we did at Obelisk. I wish if it had fully worked, as in if we had been profitable, I think there's a good chance we'd be shipping Bitcoin ASICs right now. So I think it's really important to note that.
So they never worked on a Bitcoin ASIC?
So no, we didn't. So we tried to, but we were unable to find further funding. So we kicked off a crowdfunding campaign in mid 2017 to do Siacoin ASICs. We retained, before I even joined full time, David had retained like a ASIC design company that was based in California to do the actual chip design. And I think he started that in like April or something. So I joined on full time in June of 2017. And they're like the early stages of a bull market. We actually crowdfunded $22 million worth of US dollars in Bitcoin in order to ship a product where we promised a ship date of June 30th, 2018. So we basically started in June of 2017 and said, give us money. I think it was like $2,500 or something for each device, like for each unit, for each ASIC miner. We're like, give us like $2,500, and in 1 year, we're going to ship you the Siacoin ASIC miner with these specific specs. It's going to be 800 gigahashes per second in hash rate. It's going to be, I think we said like 1,000 watts, something like that. I don't remember exactly. I think it was like 1,000 watts of power draw. And yeah, like, let's do it. And so I don't know how we got that much money. I think it was because it was a bull market. As we were going through the crowdfunding, the market really started to heat up. Siacoin was actually number 11 on the market cap list in 2017, which is like insane, like totally mind blowing. And we shipped every single device starting in August of 2018. So we're about 2 months delayed on the first batch. And we were within, I think instead of 800 gigahashes per second, it was initially like 650. And then we bumped that up closer to 800 in firmware updates. And yeah, ultimately we shipped over $26 million of ASIC miners for Siacoin and for Decred. We ended up also doing Decred because it was a similar hashing algorithm. all manufactured in the USA in the New England area across 3 different contract manufacturers, with average delays for customers of 2 to 4 months, depending on what batch and when you ordered. So you got to ask, like, what's the drama, you know? I think the drama was that if you bought a Siacoin miner, you ended up making a lot of money. If you bought a Decred miner, you ended up losing money because the market crashed in the beginning of 2018. And so people got their miner in mid 2018, and What's Miner and InnoSilicon had already flooded the market with Decred ASICs, and there was no profitability. And so everyone lost money, regardless of whether you bought an Obelisk Decred miner, an InnoSilicon Decred miner, whatever miner you bought, no matter what the specs were, you were losing money because they flooded the market and the entire crypto space imploded. And then if you got a Siacoin miner, you love Obelisk, because what ended up happening is the Sia team decided to fork the network to essentially make the Bitmain ASICs useless. And I can talk more about that, because I think that's another thing that is kind of misunderstood and contentious, which is that the Sia team, decided to fork to basically invalidate miners made by a specific manufacturer. I think to this day, it's a very contentious subject.
Well, I mean, if you were a small blocker, you fucking hated Bitmain anyway.
Yeah, so let's talk about the history there, because it's fucking crazy. Because I hate how a lot of people are just saying, oh, these guys, they worked on Sia, they worked on Obelisk, and those shitcoiners, look what they did. They forked the network. They kicked off the Bitmain machines. Fuck these guys. There's a bunch of scammers. That's basically the argument that like NBK and his people have been saying.
So the argument that I hear is that you guys are shitcoiners because you were involved with a shitcoin company.
Sure, we're not.
And then on top of that, you just decided that you liked Bitcoin, so you forked Cold Card to make a bunch of money.
Oh my God.
Now then, listen, I'm just telling you.
Yeah. No, I know.
What was said to me.
No, please, I want you to say this stuff. Anyone can just search my Twitter. I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. Been tweeting about it probably since 2014, because I lurked for like a year on Reddit, which was pretty active back then. Maybe since early 2015, I've been tweeting about it. I don't think I've ever told a person to buy anything that wasn't Bitcoin, even when I worked on Sia and Obelisk. I'm fairly certain I have never told anyone to buy anything that wasn't Bitcoin. I've been selling Bitcoin hardware wallets back in 2015, 2016. I've been using wallets like, air-gapped, like Armory on my laptop, removing the Wi-Fi card back in 2013, 2014. I've been in the space for a long time. And so, yeah, I mean, like, you can do a basic Twitter search and see that. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
but that's why I think this is so important, right? Because a lot of people don't.
Right, exactly.
So I think it's important to get somebody on and honestly, like, again, to take it back to Coin Icarus, like, he's the reason that I had you on, because he was like, I had him on. Him and Nico had you on simply like way back. Yeah.
So Nico was a huge Obelisk fan. The guy held up his Obelisk miners during the podcast. He picked them up. Those things were badass looking. They were black and red. They were made in the USA. They had really good performance, especially the second generation devices, which I codenamed the Slimmies, and I designed like the rough industrial design myself, where I was like, we're doing these mini fans and we're going to stack them, and the thing's only going to be like 4 inches wide. It's like almost like the size of like a book, like a large textbook. And the team was like, what the hell are you talking about? And I was like, I just want to do this. And so they have this like really cool, like high pitched whine to them because the fans are smaller. And so, yeah, like they were really, we also did like rack mountable liquid immersion units. We were also doing, like, we were doing some really cool stuff. And Nico made
connections for, do you still have those connections for any immersion shit? Because I got a lot of people looking for immersion.
Yeah, of course we do. Yeah.
Oh, good. We should talk.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know plenty of dudes that are
We were
struggling to build immersion stuff for Bitcoin right now because you can't get dielectric fluid for less than $50 a gallon, and you cannot find a dry cooler. They don't exist.
We spent weeks in a tank in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, in like bumfuck Ohio, working with a customer who was having some issues that ended up having nothing to do with our hardware, ended up having faulty switches and PSUs. So, or I should say PDUs, not PSUs. Our PSUs were fine. So we actually spent like weeks out there. Either I was on the ground personally for a week working in the container, in the tanks. We had a specific 1U form factor rack mountable Obelisk design that we shipped. We shipped over $1 million worth. That's pretty small scale, but it was pretty cool that we did it. We designed the whole thing out of sheet metal and had this really badass grill stamped into it. So yeah, we shipped, like I mentioned, we shipped over $26 million worth of US made ASIC miners. And so like, yeah, we did a lot of cool stuff. It's just that, the market imploded in 2018 and then we had, the crypto winter, for a few years. We tried to do some other projects. We tried to do a Bitcoin project. We tried to raise a ton of money to do a Bitcoin ASIC. And we were not successful in raising that money. If we had raised that money back in 2018, we may be shipping, a Bitcoin ASIC right now. So, which is something that still kind of kills me because we almost did it. In terms of raising the money, would we have been successful actually building the thing? I don't know. Right. But, I think with regards to the fork was a total mess. What people don't remember in terms of history is people don't remember Bitmain in 2016. Bitmain was like the enemy. Jihan was like the terror of the Bitcoin community. Antbleed in 2016, where it turned out every single Bitmain miner was backdoored. So Jihan backdoored like every Bitmain ASIC miner, and that was discovered. Obviously the fork, with I had you can go back and look on my Twitter. I had my UASF hat on, bought it, I guess, from Samson, right? The, user activated soft fork back in, I don't know, was that 2016 or something? Bitmain was anti-Bitcoin. And if you were running a small proof of work, or I shouldn't say running, but if you were developing for a small proof of work blockchain, of which Siacoin is staunchly proof of work, along with a couple others like Monero. Most of everyone hates proof of work. Siacoin was like staunchly and still is staunchly proof of work, was terrified that Bitmain was going to come in, make the first ASIC for Siacoin, and take total control over the network. And it was contentious enough with something as large as Bitcoin. So like, what are they going to do to this little token? It would have just taken 100% of the hash rate effectively. So the idea that the Siacoin team had, prior to me joining, so like earlier in 2017, was that if they make an ASIC first, they could crowdfund it. They can make the ASIC first. They could beat anyone else to market. And then there could be a wide enough distribution of hash rate via ASIC miners early on that the network would be somewhat protected, even if someone like Bitmain came in. It actually sounded like a really cool plan. Like if you were in the thick of it, if we were talking in 2017 and I was like, look what Bitmain's doing to Bitcoin. We got to make an ASIC. We got to crowdfund a community crowdfund, design an ASIC so that Bitmain doesn't crush us like they're trying to crush Bitcoin. So that's what that was the plan. And the fork stuff was super contentious even inside the company. Originally, we decided not to fork. I wrote the blog post. You can go find the blog post. I wrote the blog post explaining why Sai was not forking. The CEO did not want to write the blog post because there was a lot of internal contention within the company. And I was like, I'm going to write this blog post. We'd be crazy to fork. This goes against everything we stand for. And so I wrote the blog post, said we're not forking the network, so on, so on. And then later on, there was a majority of the Sai community was like kind of banded together and said, if you guys aren't going to fork, you at least have to like release the code so that or like help, like a lot, basically enable us to fork so that there could be some kind of fork. And then there was a fork, and the community split in half. And I think like 80% went with the chain that invalidated the Bitmain units, and like 20% went with the other chains. So that's what happened. You know, Siacoin had its own little fork war. It was a total mess, and rubbed a lot of us the wrong way. And a bunch of us ended up leaving over the next 12 to 18 months.
And to be clear, for anybody like we talked about who's not willing to admit it, that they just don't have knowledge in that particular area, to make it very clear for anybody who's not involved in mining or doesn't know things about mining, Bitmain makes more than just Bitcoin miners.
Yes.
So does What's Miner. Like,
yes,
just
Miner
so
makes
clear.
made Decred miners. I think Bitmain, InnoSilicon, and Canaan make more than Bitcoin miners.
Yes,
exactly.
So, because I mean, I've talked to some people who were like buying miners on the dip of miners that we just went through, which is coming to an end. Just in case anybody's confused about that.
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh, what did you get for a miner?" And they're like, "Obviously an ant miner, Bitcoin only." And I'm like,
Are you kidding me? Do they not understand? Do they not know the history of what happened?
Well, exactly. I mean, I have some miners. I'm involved with other miners. I'm building a mine. So like, you find out a lot of things when you start.
Right.
You get outside of that echo chamber of like everything is a shit coin. Even it, like you said, there's so many misconceptions. Shit that doesn't even have a token can be considered a shit coin.
Right.
So people don't understand that like the people on the back end of this stuff, they don't have that like that blinders of a view. They're like, no. They make all this different stuff. There's dudes that have been here since the very beginning that still run GPUs just because that's what they know.
Right. Or there's Bitcoiners that run GPUs and mine Monero and other stuff and then convert it into Bitcoin.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And that's a common thing. Like that happens all the time. You run an algo that auto selects what coin to mine, and then you convert it into Bitcoin. Is there anything wrong with that? I mean, I don't know, maybe, right? But
and then you get like two people, there's 2 or 3 voices out there that are known for being a miner and are publicly known for being a miner, and all they talk about is Bitcoin only. So everybody just assumes that all of the miners who have been in it a long time are in that same.
Right.
I know, and I say this because I was guilty of this. And then you get immersed in the culture of like the miners, and it's like, dude, next to nobody is like that.
Did you know that you can go on Compass Mining right now and buy a shitcoin ASIC?
Oh, I hate Compass.
No, look, I mean, I personally like Compass. I think that they're actually doing a good thing to allow. They're essentially what we did at Obelisk was one of the first companies to ever. We might have been the first company to ever do this. When you bought an Obelisk ASIC, we gave you a list of co-location facilities and a drop down on our order form. We pre-negotiated rates with like 10 different colos in the United States. And we said, if you want to mine, but you are unable to mine at home, whether because you have a partner or something that like will kill you for having a loud ASIC in your living room, or whether you have a shitty 23 cent per kilowatt hour electricity price like we have in downtown Boston, you just click the drop down, you choose the colo, we send your unit to the colo for you, from the manufacturer, and we pre-negotiated the best possible group rate for you. Like we did that stuff in 2017. Compass kind of is like rolling up the colos, into an easy to manage like website and service. And I think that's a good thing because you have maybe you do know, but you have no idea, like you as in the listeners have no idea how many individuals, how many plebs were bought two ASICs at one point, sent them to a co-location facility and never heard about them again. Never saw them again. It happened so many times. It happened to multiple locations that we had negotiated rates for. The people just disappeared with all the ASICs, or they shut down, or they were honest and they ran out of money and were unable to pay their power bill. So like I like what Compass is doing, but what I'm trying to say though is like most people don't realize this stuff about the miners. Most people also don't remember that Bitmain, in addition to trying to fork Bitcoin, right, and try to try to increase the block size, and they were on the wrong side of all the fork stuff. And then they were the ones behind Bitcoin Cash. They were the ones behind an attempt at SegWit 2x the next year, which we were able to defeat. They mined on devices and shipped customers used miners. They delayed orders for months, and then all of a sudden you get your unit and there's dust all over it, and like the circuit boards have like burn marks on them. You're like, what the hell just happened? And they were mining on them. And so people do not have any sense of, this history. And I'm not trying to like use it as an excuse, but like, I am proud that we sold and shipped over $26 million of ASIC miners. They were almost to spec. They were within like 15%, 10% of the spec that we promised. They were 2 to 4 months late. And depending on which one you got, you either made a lot of money or you lost a lot of money, And so ask Nico, dude loves Obelisk.
I think, I think there's a lot of confusion, like you said. Like these companies that make ASICs, they don't give and I'll say it, most of them anyway, don't give a fuck about Bitcoin.
They don't. I can tell you they don't, because I've talked with all of them.
They care about the dollar, the fiat dollar at the end of you buying their product, whether that be a Bitcoin miner or an ETH miner or whatever million other coins.
They'll also make miners for private customers and not advertise them. I just want to say, like, they will work on like a miner for a specific shitcoin, and they will never sell it to the public. That stuff is happening. Then also, I don't that like hit piece that came out from like whoever NVK's person who wrote it about us went after us for having like a hidden circuit in the Siacoin ASIC chip that allowed a fork, that would invalidate Bitmain devices, but not Obelisk devices. And they were saying, we basically making it seem like we were so devious, we planned for this to happen. What they don't know is when you build a chip, there's all these different types of features that you can turn on or off. And every single chip has that. And every single ASIC manufacturer has a bunch of features in the chip and different kinds of circuitry that are just not used. And so that's just like when you make an ASIC, that's what happens. Like there's, whether that's a ASIC for mining or whether that's like an Intel CPU, there's or NVIDIA GPU, there's all this stuff in the chip. You try all these different optimizations, you try all these things, you have all the circuitry, you get the chips back, you test it, half the shit doesn't work. So then you don't enable it, and then you ship it. We had a bunch of stuff that didn't work in our chips, and we just turned those features off. They would have been optimizations that could have increased hash rate. We turned those features off and we shipped them to customers. And so, yes, there was a way that we figured out. And it was something that, David, the CEO, did have in mind always, which is like, you can have the chip run different, essentially slight different variations of the proof of work algorithm. And so I can't remember. I don't think I'm fully technical enough in that level to remember exactly how he did it, but they didn't break the Bitmain miners. They slowed them down by an order of magnitude. So they didn't invalidate them. They just like crippled them. They managed to find something that was like a feature that existed in the Obelisk chip, and they made a slight change to the Siacoin proof of work algorithm, and then hoped that the Bitmain miners would not be able to just release a firmware update to also follow along. There's an enormous chance that the Bitmain miners would have been able to switch to the fork chain. It was like a coin flip. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't know what their chips were capable of doing. It's totally possible that they could have looked at the new algorithm and said, oh, our chips can do this as well. And they could have switched to it. I guess how it worked out is that didn't happen, and the units were totally crippled. So like,
didn't Bitmain go through something like that with Bitcoin miners though, with ASIC Boost?
So ASIC boost is another shit show. ASIC boost was one of the that's one of the big theories as to why Bitmain resisted SegWit. So what happened with SegWit was that, I mean, SegWit should have been a very non-controversial change, essentially increasing the block size without any kind of downsides, without having to do a hard fork,
Right.
just do soft fork, like super non-contentious. It's like, oh my God, we just found a way to increase the block size without needing to hard fork the network. Like, this is kind of amazing. There's a whole list of benefits to it, and it should have been non-contentious. For some inexplicable reason, Bitmain was completely against it. And so one of the theories as to why they were against it, and there were a lot of really cool Medium posts, blog posts back in that period of time explaining it, was because there's this thing called ASIC boost, which essentially allowed you to get, I think it was like 20% increase in hash rate, which is, I mean, you're doing mining stuff. Like 20% is a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not a little thing. It's a lot. And the theory is that I believe ASIC boost was patented, I believe. And so Bitmain was not allowed to like ship with that feature overtly enabled.
Yeah, they used it in their minds, right? They
basically supposedly, I don't think it was ever like decisively proven, but they enabled what was called covert or secret ASIC boost. The only, like, there's some really cool Medium posts with like blockchain forensics trying to show that they were actually using ASIC boost. I think it was like looking at like the nonces and stuff. And I don't, and that was over my head, honestly. But you can go kind of dig up these blog posts if you're interested in the history. And yeah, they were supposedly using this covert ASIC boost in order to only use it on their own units. So they were shipping units to customers that were used without ASIC boost enabled. And they were supposedly mining on their own hardware with ASIC boost enabled, getting something like 20% gains in hash rate, and then not allowing their customers to take advantage of that same hash rate, essentially setting a different rule for themselves than what was set for their customers. And the crazy thing about this covert ASIC boost was that SegWit would cause it to not work anymore. So the whole theory was that they were holding up SegWit because they were actually using this covert ASIC boost feature that they could not talk about, and that's why they were actually holding everything up. And that's like pretty insane information, because that's what led to the entire like block size war back then.
And it has to do, now my rudimentary understanding of it is it has something to do with SegWit is able to layer transactions in a way that gets more transactions into the same size block, where for some reason their ASIC boost, it didn't help with their ASIC boost, or their ASIC boost didn't get the boost that they wanted because it was something about the amount of transactions that were.
It's a little. I mean, I may have been able to explain it a few years ago, but I can't now. That sounds like you could be onto something, but yeah.
The only information I got on it was out of the block wars,
right?
So
right.
It was something like that was my rudimentary understanding. Now the other thing is,
go on.
A SegWit's another one of those things where people will be like, "Oh yeah, SegWit," and then you like read up, and they're very specific about the fact that like there's really like probably a couple dozen people that really get what SegWit is, like how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another one of those things that people would like say it and just be like, "Oh yeah, SegWit. Yeah, I know what SegWit is." And then you start to read up on it. It's like it's a pretty like thin crowd of people who actually really get what the SegWit soft fork did.
But also, when you look at the Taproot activation stuff this year,
Same thing.
Yeah, but like most people have no understanding why there was such a huge debate about activation methods. Right. Everyone was terrified. We had such PTSD from the last time that everyone was terrified that something was going to go wrong this time around. And it's kind of incredible that it didn't. And so I think, like, I don't know. I know this kind of feels like a tangent, but it's also kind of fun to talk about. but I just think it's important for the history. Like Bitmain was the ultimate evil back in 2016.
Yeah.
Obelisk started because of Bitmain. And I was excited to work on that project because doing an American-made ASIC miners and competing with and ultimately giving a huge fuck you to Bitmain, even though I did not agree with the fork and I specifically wrote an article against it, it was still, in that sense, kind of fun to give that huge fuck you to Bitmain because they lost a lot of money. They probably lost tens of millions of dollars because of us. And they almost went bankrupt as well. People don't realize. A couple of years ago, not because of us, because of other issues. Because they were mining Bitcoin Cash. That's their own fault. Plus, they had some huge tape out failures, but that's another story. But yeah, so like I'm not at all defensive about what went down with Obelisk. Like I think like we shipped all this hardware. We came really close to being I would say we were successful in shipping, but we were not successful in making a profit. We had so much stuff go wrong along the way. We ended up spending almost all of that money that we got in revenue. So at the end, we had no money. And so the only thing we could do was try to go to investors and, raise money. We actually tried to do a grin miner, which was a total failure. And we had to refund all the customers in full, which we did. And and even before that, we had tried to, raise money for the Bitcoin ASIC in 2018, and it was already in the bear market, and no investor. Well, one investor was interested, but we were trying to do something with Global Foundries actually, which is in the U.S. before they killed their 7-nanometer process, and that did not work out. And so then ultimately, I and some of my teammates decided to leave to start Foundation Devices because we wanted to have an impact on the space. We wanted to make Bitcoin sovereignty more accessible to everyday people. So that's kind of like the origin story. We would not have been able to start this company if we hadn't done all that mining hardware stuff. We would have never met each other. We would have never worked together. I would have never done I would have never learned how to make hardware, and actually build stuff in the US and ship it. So yeah, that was a very formative experience for me and for the for my co-founders that were then teammates, back at Obelisk.
Nice. Well, so disclaimer too, I do own Antminers. I have 4 of them that are running currently in my basement.
How could you? I'm just kidding.
So, and I have another dozen sitting on a shelf that are waiting for plugs as I build a mine. So, I'm in no way, shape, or form just specifically taking shots at them. I want it to be, like you said, there's a lot of fucking people that don't know.
They're a much better company now, by the way. Jihan's gone.
Yeah, their S17 sucked.
Well, yeah, I don't mean in terms of, I know they had all the issues with S17, but I mean in terms of management and people.
Yeah.
Jihan's gone. They reorged the company, and they don't seem to be trying to mess with anything Bitcoin related anymore in terms of influencing development. They just make the units. They're pretty good. They have a great relationship with TSMC, the foundry, and they bang out these units. I think they might be the only one allowed to use the 7-nanometer process at TSMC. And they're, making ASIC miners for Bitcoin, and they don't have a political agenda anymore. So I also think companies change, right? I have no problem with Bitmain today.
Fair enough. So, questions to wrap it up. How does Foundation plan on staying Bitcoin only?
So I would actually say that I don't like the term Bitcoin only for us. I like to say Bitcoin centric because we want to make devices that we want to make phones and stuff over the next few years and beyond.
So stuff kind of like what they're doing at the Calyx Foundation, or?
Yeah, something like that, but different, new operating systems.
Yeah, I know there's, I heard Odell talking about how there's a lot of projects out there that are trying to do it, and just nobody's really made anything that's user-friendly, or
exactly
when you receive it, it's actually relevant.
Exactly. Sounds exactly. So we want to work our way up to that kind of stuff. We want to make a whole host of devices that you as a sovereign Bitcoiner will want to buy and will hopefully need, and hopefully will be accessible enough that you can share that with friends and family that are new to Bitcoin, right? So hardware wallets is where we're starting. I think we'll probably do some stuff with nodes, in the next year or two. The idea of flashing something into a Raspberry Pi stops the vast majority of people from achieving that sovereignty. And yeah, we want to do something with smartphones as well. And in that case, it's like, I can't call it like a Bitcoin only smartphone. You know what I mean? It has to, but I call it Bitcoin centric. I think Bitcoin needs to be, and Lightning needs to be a core part of the operating system.
So essentially not dabbling into shitcoins though.
No.
Not like you're not going to come out with an ETH phone.
No.
I think that's really the question that is how I meant to ask it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We're never going to tell anyone to buy a shitcoin, right? Like the craziest thing to me is like, if you look at Ledger's tweets, it's like always announcing new shitcoin stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, like you're encouraging your customers to go buy this stuff. So yeah, I mean, we know exactly what we want to do. We have a pretty clear sense of product roadmap over the next few years and beyond. And our whole thing is a Bitcoin centric decentralized internet, meaning we think all this infrastructure is going to be built on top of Bitcoin. And we think the most important thing is to give people the tools to, store their own Bitcoin, and then also have privacy and sovereignty and so on. So more similar to what like an Umbrel or Start9 is thinking, how like both of them are, it's not just Bitcoin, it's also like self-hosting and sovereignty. So we're kind of in a similar, I think, company and philosophical mindset. Like
with better licenses, right?
Oh yeah, always free open source licenses, 100% all the way through. Honestly, like in their defense, it's easier to do that when you're selling the hardware. Because we have a way to make money, which is we'll sell you a device. They don't really have a way to make money right now, and so I think that's why I honestly think that's why they're afraid to have open source licenses, because they know that if they open source it, other companies are going to fork it, and we might do it, right? But also, I would point out that any company that forks it would then have to open source their stuff too if they do like a GPL license.
Start9's got something too, though, right? Not just Umbrel.
Start9 and Umbrel both have very similar licenses in terms of restrictions on commercial use, which prevent them from being fully open source. The whole Bitcoin world, the whole ecosystem is built upon a foundation of open source software. So it just seems like antithetical to us to basically, like, for us, if we're saying here's devices, here's hardware that you're going to use to run Bitcoin Core on, or to create Bitcoin transactions on, to create PSBTs on, to sign PSBTs on, but like this code is not open source, like that sounds totally antithetical. The whole point of the space is that everyone is copying everyone else. There's nothing new under the sun. Everyone is building on top of a ton of open source software. Like I mentioned before, Cold Card Trezor, 90% of that code is MicroPython. That's an open source project. When you go to add things in like QR code scanning or crypto libraries or whatever, you're usually just going on GitHub and you're looking up open source libraries and you're auditing them, you're contributing to them, and then you're using them in your projects. You're basically building a tower, a skyscraper where each layer is someone else's work, and then your work is also mixed in there. And that's why the software world has flourished over the last couple of decades, is because the barriers to entry are like zero. You hop in and all of a sudden you can have an app up and running because you're using all these different open source building blocks. And
right.
So the fact that that these companies are using all these open source building blocks, adding some of their own code, and then saying, oh, but you can't use mine. To me, that's out of fear and a lack of confidence in their work, I think. Because if you have confidence that you can move fast and you can ship really great stuff, you're going to be fine, even if it's free and open source. That's how we feel. Someone can come and copy Passport right now, but I'll tell you, by the time they ship their product, we're going to have the next version out and it's going to be 10 times better. And then they can copy that version and it repeats, right? So it forces companies, if you're open source, to not be complacent, to always be building. And if you want to be complacent and not touch, not do any work over a few years after shipping and hope that your like IP can just sustain you, like, I'm sorry, that's not a recipe for a good company or a good project. So that's kind of how I view it and how we view it, which is like, you're using open source building blocks and you're giving back to the ecosystem that gave you those open source building blocks.
But I think that mind state, right, comes from exactly what you talked about when you thought about, like, when you wanted to start Foundation, right? You wanted to be able to give access to sovereignty and make the Bitcoin experience better for people, more user-friendly interface, right? And you want to make sovereignty more accessible to people. When something like that is your mission statement or your goal, then I feel like the other stuff, it should be obvious, right? As opposed to a company that does something like you just said. Like, to me, when I look at that, I know your object is to make money. That's it.
And our object, by the way, is to make money.
Right.
I personally think that, like, if you go read the first blog post we published when we started the company, which was in like April or May, I think we published the first blog post. We make it very clear that our entire mission is to build open source hardware. So then, like, when we actually go build it and we use other open source software as part of our products, and the makers of that software, as in, NVK, freak out about it and then say we're like cloners or something, my response to that is like, our entire purpose of existing is to be the open source hardware company, to try to build like the most beautiful, well-designed, intuitive, easy to use open source hardware possible. If you want, you can just take our stuff, you could even take our circuitry and our mechanical design if you want. Like, we're open source. And so, yeah, that's like our reason for being here. Like, that's the entire company plan. When we started the company, we wrote up the whole, like, our essentially the strategy and the brand, and defined all that. Open source is at the center of all of it. It's open source, it's privacy, it's sovereignty, and it's Bitcoin. Those are our key elements. And I think we're going to make a ton of money, because I think that there's a huge opening in this world of companies violating your privacy. I've been talking about Apple and writing about Apple for like over a year now. I wrote a whole series of blog posts later last year called Falling Out of Love with Apple, where I talked about all the crazy shit that was happening in their ecosystem. It was shared by people like, the CEO of Proton Mail, Tim Sweeney, CEO of Epic Games, that got into the public spat with Apple. And now I've been telling investors that Apple is going to be really bad for Bitcoin, because they're going to block apps from the App Store. They're going to block app updates, which is happening right now with Sphinx. And like, we're very selfish in the sense that we think that this embrace of open source hardware and software, this embrace of Bitcoin, this embrace of privacy, this embrace of sovereignty, and this embrace of made in the USA are going to allow us to build a really unique company that's going to be able to, grow alongside Bitcoin and fill a gap that is created by all the crazy shit that Apple and Google are doing right now. And we've been very clear about that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think the most important thing here is it is very selfish. You know what I mean? Like, we're not doing it out of charity, the open source thing. It's not something that we do for the marketing, and then as soon as it gets tough and someone forks our code, we close our stuff off, right? Which is what Coldcard did. It's not like that. Like, this is our entire reason for existence.
I like to hear it. All right. Well, I told you I'd only keep you for an hour. It's been an hour and a half. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I gotta take out the puppy. So yeah, this was fun. Really appreciate you having me on. When I was coming on, I was like, my investors are going to kill me if they listen to any of your other podcast episodes. I was like, they're gonna I'll email me and be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, just don't listen to the pirate episode. You'll be fine.
I was listening to that one a bit today, actually. But hey, yeah, thank you. This was great, and I appreciate you asking the hard questions. I don't actively go out there to try to engage with any of the drama or anything. So yeah, thanks seriously for having me on and giving me the opportunity to answer those questions.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate having you, and I'll catch you on Twitter.
All right, sounds great.
See ya.